up, old chap? This is Leon, the Paperback Maniac, here to bring you a little collection update. Or maybe not so little, actually. It's been a few months since I did my UK paperback horror collection video, and since then I have amassed a sizable pile of books from across the pond, so I thought it was time to share those with you all. I am a huge fan of the nasties from the late 70s and early 80s coming out of the UK. So, writers like James Herbert, of course, Sean Hudson, Harry Adam Knight, John Halkin, Nick Sharman, the list goes on and on. I'm also particularly a huge fan of the horror artwork that the UK publishers were putting out. I think, the fact that they were not afraid to, telegraph from their covers that they were proffering pulp trash. They weren't trying to pull the wool over anyone's eyes. It was very evident the kinds of books that they were, selling. And, I find that refreshing and quite charming, to be frank. So, yeah, big fan of the UK horror books. And so here we go. This is my collection update of UK titles. So the first batch of books are from Guy N. Smith, probably one of the, the leading pulp meisters of the time. The first book we've got is The Sucking Pit. This edition is published by Grafton in 1989, though it was originally published by New English Library in 1975. Really excited to read this one. Stephen King, in his book Dance Macabre, called this title a nominee for one of the all-time pulp horror classics, and I would agree. That title, The Sucking Pit, is just an amazing title for a pulp horror novel. Really excited to see what this one's all about. Okay, next up, we've got The Slime Beast by Guy N. Smith, and this is another one of his classic pulp titles. This one was published by New English Library in 1976, though it was originally published in 1975. And that is just an amazing cover. Just absolutely love that. So gorgeous. Okay, next up, we've got a book called Cannibals by Guy N. Smith. This was published by Arrow in 1986. And that is also a very intriguing cover there. Okay, next up, we've got a book called The Wood. This one was published by New English Library in 1985. That's pretty cool. I mean, even when they did skeletons, I still think that they're cooler than, say, the zebra covers of the time. I mean, just there's something about it. They just had, they got the atmosphere and the ambience right with these UK, with these covers. The UK did. Okay, next up, another Guy N. Smith book. This is The Master, and this was published by Arrow in 1988. And that is really cool. Okay, next one from Guy N. Smith. We've got Fiend. This one was published by Sphere in 1988. And just look carefully there. Look how gory that is. You would not see that kind of image gracing the cover of a zebra or a Tor or even an Onyx title. So, yeah, they made no bones about what they were doing. Okay, another Guy N. Smith book here. We've got Entombed. This edition was published by Arrow in 1986, although it was originally published by Hamlin in 1982. And I actually originally had the U.S. version from Dell, just to give you a little side-by-side comparison. There you go. As you can see, the U.S. version is very ho-hum and, just nondescript, and the UK edition is just a lot more appealing. I mean, would you not agree? Yeah, case in point, right? Okay, next up, another one from Guyan Smith. This is another very well-known book of his, Death Bell, which I'm really excited to read. This was published by Hamlin in 1980. And then he made a sequel sometime later to Death Bell. This is Demons, and this was published by Arrow in 1987. It's another cool cover. So those are my most recent Guyan Smith books. Okay, next up we've got a few more Hamlin titles. Hamlin was just one of those great imprints from the UK. So the first one, this is one that was unfamiliar to me until recently. This is Labyrinth. This was written by Eric Mackenzie Lamb and published by Hamlin in 1980, the paperback version, although it looks like it was originally published in 1979. Okay, another Hamlin book here. We've got The Curse by Daniel Farson, and this was published by Hamlin in 1980. Okay, another Hamlin book here. We've got The Nightmare Man. This is another one that I had never heard of before. This is written by David Wilshire and published by Hamlin in 1978. Apparently it was made into a BBC film. There's a little still from the film. Was unfamiliar with the book and the movie, actually. Okay, a couple more Hamlin titles. This is The Sanctuary, written by Glenn Chandler. I have another Glenn Chandler book called The Tribe, which has an amazing cover, better than this one. But this one here was published by Hamlin in 1981. Okay, and I think, next up from Hamlin, this is The Man Who Would Not Die. What an amazing title, right? A horrific ghost story. This was written by Thomas Page, and this edition was published by Hamlin in 1983, though it was originally published in 1981. And this looks like an intriguing novel. Looking forward to reading that one. Okay, and then the last Hamlin book here, we've got Gate of Fear. This one was written by Lewis Mallory and published by Hamlin in 1981. So you see a lot of these are from the early 80s. Just a great time period for pulp horror from the UK. Okay. All right, next up, we've got Carrion by Gary Brandner. And this book was published by Arrow. This edition was published by Arrow in 1987. Gary Brandner is a U.S. writer. He's actually, like a California-based writer. But he published a lot of stuff in the UK as well. And he's one of those writers whose UK editions are almost always much, much cooler than the US editions. And this one is no exception. That is just a really cool image, in my opinion. This is a Gary Brandner book I have not read yet. I'm looking forward to checking it out. I like Gary Brandner quite a bit. Of the Howling fame, of course. Love that movie. Haven't read that book or any of that series. Okay, next up, classic, absolute classic. This is James Herbert's The Rats. This was published by New English Library originally in 1974. This is the 1982, is it 82? Yeah, 1982 reprint. This is probably the ultimate, nasty animal attack book. The one that kind of set off a whole wave of animal attack books in the late 70s and early 80s. I read this, I originally read this on my Kindle, and I just figured I had to have, a physical copy of this book, so I went ahead and picked it up. But great book, very effective, especially for someone like me who absolutely loathes rodents of any kind. Okay, next up, we've got The Calling by Bob Randall. And this book was published by New English Library in 1981. Okay, next we got a couple of Steve Harris books. I showed you guys some other Steve Harris books that I had bought recently. This one is Angels. It's published by Headline in 1993 with some more just amazing artwork by Steve Crisp, who did a lot of, artwork for Headline. He did all the great, Richard Lehman Headline covers, a couple of which you'll see shortly here. But that's a really cool, almost just bombastic cover. A lot going on there, but I really dig it. And then one more Steve Harris book. This is The Devil on May Street. And this was published by Headline in 1998. The paperback version I'm holding here, it was originally published in 1997. This one seems like a lot of fun. I am a huge fan of like kind of kid-centric horror, horror in which kids are like facing off against some sort of evil, particularly supernatural evil. I love that. And then this looks like the perfect, example of that. Basically, from what I get from the synopsis, is about a bunch of kids facing off against some supernatural evil over the summer. Seems really, really fun. So I'm looking forward to checking this one out. Okay, so I just mentioned Richard Lehman, got a couple more of his Headline titles. This is Endless Night. This one was published by Headline in 1994. This paperback edition, it was originally published in 93, probably in hardcover. Richard Lehman was getting published in hardcover in the UK, certainly not stateside. But yeah, that is another one of those really cool Steve Crisp covers, and I've heard a lot of good things about this one. This is Lehman doing more of like a thriller, but with the same characteristic gut-wrenching violence. So yeah, I'm looking forward to checking this one out pretty soon, hopefully. And then another Richard Lehman book. This is Amara. And now this one was published by Headline posthumously in 2003. However, it is actually one of Richard Lehman's earliest written novels. The original title for this was called Dead Corse, C-O-R-S-E, which apparently is an archaic term for a corpse. And he wrote this, I believe, in 1979, according to his amazing book, A Writer's Tale, which is just like one of the best books on writing and writers, like an autobiography that I've ever read. But he originally wrote this like very early in his career, and he meant to follow up his first published novel, The Cellar, with this one, but it was apparently rejected by his publisher at the time, Warner Books. And basically he just shelved it and never published it during his lifetime. But it is evidently about a female Egyptian mummy who goes on a rampage, and that sounds fantastic. Can't wait to read that. I mean, who the hell wouldn't want to read a book about a female Egyptian mummy going on a rampage? Sounds amazing. Okay, and then one more Richard Lehman book. This is Tread Softly. He wrote this under the pen name Richard Kelly, and this was published by Star in 1988. This edition, it was first published in 1987. And that's a pretty cool cover. Okay, a few more here. Next up, we've got Full Circle by Peter Straub. This book was published by Corgi in 1977 originally, although this version here is the 1987 reprint. And Peter Straub is one of those blind spots for me. You know, I hear really nothing but good things about him, but I have not read any of his works yet. I hear, Ghost Story is great. I hear a lot of his stuff is great, and so I figured, maybe this would be a good one to start with. Or I don't know, maybe not. If you are a Peter Straub fan, let me know. because I'd like to know like what's the best thing to start with from him. Okay, next up we've got Valley of Lights by Stephen Gallagher. This one was published by New English Library in 1988, though it was originally published in 1987. And that's a cool cover. It looks like a kind of a crime horror hybrid, which I can get down with if it's well done. Okay, next up, we've got Forbidden Garden by Diane Guest. This one, this edition was published by Fontana in 1992, though it was originally published by Bantam in 1987. And this one's got some inner artwork there. Now, this is one of the rare cases where I actually do prefer the original US version. In fact, I have it here to show you as a little comparison. There is the original Bantam edition, and there's the UK. I don't know. What do you guys think? Personally, I kind of like the Bantam one, and it's got amazing artwork on the back too. Yeah. So there's that, and then finally, the last book of this update. I absolutely love this cover. This is AngelList by Peter Tremaine. This book was published by Grenada in 1985. You just gotta love the severed head in a jar. Amazing. Just absolutely fantastic. That's the kind of cover that screams, read me. This is the kind of book that I want to read like ASAP. Just love that cover. So yeah, there it is, guys. That is my UK horror paperback update. Hope you enjoyed watching that. Stay tuned on my channel, as always, for more book reviews and collection updates and collection videos. A lot of fun stuff planned for the summer. So I will see you guys later. Peace out.